Yeah, and welcome. This time it looks different, right? Look at all this. Corey's actually a professional. Like, if you didn't know that, you're used to seeing him on his True Fire white background. He actually, really can do stuff. And I was really kind of impressed when I came over. I was like, dude, look at you.
Spinning knobs, virtual digital knobs.
You don't even see this over here. There's 20 amps, and then he has about 190 pedals down here on the ground, and he's got his record. He's for real.
Just trying to make a living.
And then you're going on tour too.
That's right.
Bastard.
Yeah, soon.
With one of those guys. Everything's just aligning. The stars are all like, Corey. Anyways, the last rhythm little lesson we did was a hit with the folks. So get funky. You got funk. Right. You got some soul in your hole.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah. Hit with the ladies. So anyways, we're gonna do I've always been curious about different chord inversions and kind of funkier chord inversions.
Right.
I really wished I could do it, and then you were showing some really cool shapes I haven't necessarily seen before.
Well, some of the ones in the blues video we did, I was playing this.
Yep.
And I was playing stuff like that. And I didn't really go over that chord, so I worked it into this really cool funk lesson that we're gonna do.
Okay.
Where I played we were in key of D.
Yeah.
And we're gonna play that as a G7 and then an A7.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great because I'm also gonna talk about this chord I use for the D, which is a great D9.
Yeah.
And I first learned that from.
Oh right.
That kind of thing, like a Stevie Ray Vaughan thing.
Yep.
And then, I think it's really important that we also mention about where we learn this stuff from, because it's all secondhand.
Yeah, right.
I remember the story about when Hendrix said he stole from Buddy Guy, and Buddy Guy's daughter heard it on the Tonight Show and started crying.
No way.
Yeah, because he's like, dig everything I learned from Buddy Guy. People.
What's crazy too that I didn't know, and I saw it on a documentary with Hendrix, is I didn't know he played in Little Richard's band.
Dude,
and I was like,
the record is right there.
Yeah.
I have it.
Great. And he's in the background, and he's like...
Jimi Hendrix and Little Richard. It sounds like Hendrix playing with Little Richard. Yeah. I hope it's not fabricated. I bought it at a record show in the 90s, man.
So good.
So anyway, I learned... I'm sorry.
No, hold on. We're going to save something for you.
All right.
He's going to break it down, and we recorded a good 30-minute awesome full dive into getting this funky, because this is where it all comes from.
That's right.
And then how to mix pentatonic licks, basically, in with your funky chords. So it's going to be a sick lesson. I'm going to leave Corey's links below. Make sure you support him at his website if you want to go deep with Corey, Corey.com or whatever it is. Congilio.com.
That's right.
That's right. And he's an Italian funk guy. So what can't you what's better than that, right? So down below, links, check those out, and let's get into the lesson.
Some would say maybe I have the sauce.
Oh, look at you. Okay.
When it comes to blues, you're not just going to be playing shuffles and slow blues your whole life. Some of my favorite players, like Albert Collins or Albert King, Freddie King, they would often have these really funky blues tunes that, you want to create a great groove and a great pocket and a cool little rhythm part to fall into, not just because of it's being fun to play, but you got to play along with the other instruments. There's generally going to be, obviously, a bass player, but there's going to be a keyboard player probably playing B3, maybe another guitar player, maybe a harmonica player or horn section. And these little inversions in these shapes really, they really speak to the tune, and they really fall in well with them. And I could play these all day. It's just a lot of fun. But the thing you really need to get under your belt first is a grasp of the 16th note rhythm. A really good song to even reference for this, even though it's not of a dominant 7 variety so much as The Thrill Is Gone, because it's got this sort of mid-tempo 16th note rhythm that's sort of pulsating through the tune. And just if you're really a beginner and you don't know much about how to what we call subdivide rhythms, you take your quarter note, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, double that is 8th notes, then is your 16th, which is 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a. So you don't even need a chord to start this. You can do what's called the scratch, and you can kind of just take your arm, your picking arm, your strumming arm, and you want to play something sort of like this. Just rake the strings. 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a. And the way it was described to me the best was, imagine you just like rinsed your hands off and you're trying to wring water off. That's the kind of idea you want to have. So if you're just playing, mute your strings and just give it a strum. Jello wrist, right? That's kind of what we're going for here. Now this is really going to serve you well not only in your blues and funk playing, but in your rock and acoustic playing too. You know, if you have to play something that's like, we're going to be able to do all that stuff. But this is fun. It's kind of in my wheelhouse of playing funky blues rock stuff, so I thought we would work with it. So let's take a look at that strum one more time. And again, mute your strings. Try to get all the strings quiet. Don't have any strings ringing out stray like that. We don't want that. So we take it really slowly. I would start with maybe a really low metronome setting or a drum groove setting, and have the the metronome sort of giving you this groove: 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. Now we're going to get into the cool chords that I showed you in a second, but if you take a D9 chord, because our riff was in the key of D here. If you've been playing blues for a little while, you probably know that chord, but if not, take a look here. D, F sharp, C, and an E. That E note actually is what gives you the 9 sound. And you see that I wrap my thumb around, and it helps me to mute the 6th string. And I really don't play the high A all that much, but if it sneaks in, it's okay, because that note is actually in a D7 or D9 chord. So what you can do really cool, that's really cool, is just use this in practice and get that muted sound happening there, right? So you have a nice muted strum. You're not just grabbing the strings now, you actually are intending to play a chord at some point. So you want to go 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. Now, the magic is in your left hand at this point. I call this the engine. This is your right hand if you're a right-handed player. For strumming, the engine has to go, right? And the steering wheel is your left hand, and that tells you where to turn or what turn to make. In this case, we're going to make a turn on beat number 1. So we're going to go 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. So all I'm doing is just pushing my fingers down, but as soon as I'm done with that beat, I raise them up to get back to the scratch. So for a 1, 2, 3, 4. And you say, well, how does this work with blues? Well, like I said earlier, a lot of blues songs are based off of these funkier grooves, and they're really fun to not only play rhythm on, but eventually to solo on too. And if we're in the key of D, you know, our chords for our 1, 4, 5 would be D, D9, or D7. You could play a G7, and then you could play an A7. Or you could move up here and play G9 and A9, which gets us a little bit closer to where we were for our example. Okay, so I touched on a little bit about how you're going to actually make that sound, right? Then we're going to go to the G9. You could do the same thing if you wanted to. Up a whole step to the A9. So you see we're putting these pieces together. You have to have the engine moving first before you steer with the left hand, right? So let's talk about some of these really fun chord shapes that we played. Now, if you've been following me online for several years, you know that I like to play chords in smaller segments, you know, little inversions. I think they really work well in ensemble playing, and when you're in a situation where, like I said, there's another guitar or a keyboard player. Obviously, there'll be a bass player. It could be a fun blues band if you didn't have a bass player, but I always like having a bass player with me. So we want to get out of his or her way, and these little high shapes are a really good way to do that. So let's start with this first one, because a lot of people know the 9 chords that are like this or like this. But we're going to do this really fun one here. And I actually learned this from Stevie Ray Vaughan, of all people, and I adapted it to sort of more of these funkier blues rhythm styles. So the root note is actually here on your pinky on the 10th fret. Your second finger is going to play the 2nd string F sharp, and then the second finger will play the 3rd string E, that's your 9 sound, and then the C note is being played here on the third, with the third finger, 4th string, 8th fret. So you see that you and the bass player make a nice chord when you do that. So that's going to require some more muting now, so this is going to be a little bit more difficult, but it's really, really fun once you get the hang of it. Right? Really, really fun chord. Now, a lot of us will know this 9 chord, which is certainly great. You saw me using all kinds of different little shapes. But let's start here with the 9 chord, because we've worked on that down below for the D. You could do the same thing. But what I like to do is keep this harmony working like this. So we have our D again, because a D note is in a G9 chord. More on that in a moment. Then we're going to have the G note there on the 1st finger, 2nd string, 8th fret. The F note is on the 3rd string, that's 10th fret, and then the B falls right there. So that makes a really nice G7 chord there. Then you're going to move that up a whole step for your A. And then back to your new guy. But what's really important, and some of the greatest blues rhythm players and rhythm guitar players of all time will tell you that keeping harmony tight on the higher strings is really important. Did you ever see a keyboard player maybe playing R&B or gospel, and they go boop, 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 and their hands are real close together? It's because they're doing what we're doing right now. They're not going... They're keeping this harmony nice and tight. We could even play an A7 here. So all those notes are really, really nice and tight together, and they're not jumping around on the guitar, pulling our ear one way or another, and it works really well with the rest of the group. Okay, so let's try to put that with a simple 16th note strum. So if I was to go 1, 2, 3, 4. One, 2, let's go to G7 now. Whole step up, whole step down. Right? So if you wanted to play the track, here we go. Here's your 1 chord. We want to make it a little busier, we can do that. We can start to put our hand down at different points throughout that 16th note sequence. So I'll go a 1, 2, 3, So that's where you want to get to eventually, is something more like that. And let's go back to where we were putting our hand down. What you're going to hear is that you're playing a lot of accents on the upbeats, a lot on the E and the of the 1E and 2E and so on in that sequence. So a lot of people think you have to go and try to find it with your right hand. As long as this is going at that tempo, it's your built-in human metronome, I call it, you can go... See, I'm just putting my hand if you can really get that happening, it's going to work into not only your funky blues playing, but like I said earlier, into all of your rock stuff too. Okay, let's take a look at how I put in some single note lines with this stuff. So earlier you saw me playing these funky 7th chords, but I was throwing in these cool little single note lines too. Some sounded major-y, some sounded minor, pentatonic based. I'm doing a little bit of all those things. Let's talk about how we can work those into our rhythm playing. We're going to have to really make sure we pay attention to our right hand now and not flail around too much. But let's say you've got a good handle on the right hand. Earlier, I was showing you that you really had to have this big, loose, wide strum. And that's true. But now what we're going to do is we're going to take this more of a major pentatonic idea after that. Because we're in the key of D, D major pentatonic. It's right there. And we're going to play that little riff. Which is going to be B, A, B, D, D, B, A. And then we get to do something really fun with that. So if you've played some rock and you palm muted, keep your hand in the same spot. See, all these techniques translate. So we're not gonna play more of a hard rock thing. We're gonna play this sort of bubble picking thing. That's really the cornerstone of a lot of funky and R&B guitar type stuff. Okay, so once you have the right hand cooking, you don't want to flail around too much now. When you want to add these single note bubble picking parts, you really want to make sure that you keep your hand close, use that palm muting, and we're gonna attach this rhythmic subdivision to the picking or to the strumming first, and then we'll add in the picking. So we're going to go 1 E and a 2 E and up, 1 E and a 2 E and up. Then the bubble picking part is going to go which is B, A, B, D, D, B, A. So together, 1 E and a 2 E and a E and a 3 E. And you'll notice that as you play those, your hand really falls in line with the rhythm. 1 E and a. Okay, so ones are down, E's are up, ands are downs, and uhs are up. So 1 E and a 2 E and a. Then I go down for beat number 1, and I'm going to play. So 1 E and a 2 E and a. Okay, so before we go into the 4 chord, let's talk about that bubble picking part one more time because it can be a little confusing. If we're listening to a lot of music that's real rock oriented or very downbeat oriented, some of these upbeat feels will be hard to grasp at first. So it's really important to kind of take it slowly. Don't get discouraged because upbeats are hard to feel if you're listening to a lot of music that's dun 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 dun, very downbeat oriented. This is music that's really on the upbeat, but it percolates, and that's what makes it feel fun and danceable. That's why I really think it's fun and have been drawn to it for a long time. So if we're playing that chord one more time, 1 E and a 2 E and a, this bubble picking part starts on the E of beat 3. So 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 2 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 2 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 2 3 E and a 4 E and a, and I play an upstroke because I like to keep all of my strokes moving with the proper strum, so downs or ones and so on and so forth. 1 E and a, 1 E and a. It's that sort of human metronome that keeps us in time. And that would be it sped up, obviously. Okay, so let's talk about the 4 chord. Now we can go to a minor sound or combine major and minor pentatonic and really create something fun. Okay, so we're going to play this. We worked on that earlier. That's our G7. And the same strum applies. So I did two things there. So I played the chord, same rhythm, okay? So as long as your engine is moving the right way, you're going to be able to play this. 1 E and a, 2 E and a. What you could think of is down, up, up. But I really don't like to think about that because I just want your hand to be sort of clenching on that chord, and that's what makes the sound at the appropriate time. Now, if you wanted to take that same sort of idea and change it to more of a D minor pentatonic sound, we could start here on the D on the 4th string. We can go D, C, D, F, F, D, C. Okay. Now, again, it's the same rhythmic idea, it's the same function, it's the same technique, bubble picking, virtually the same idea. This is a good way to kind of start putting these ideas into your playing because it gets your mechanics flowing and it really gets your hands used to the motion and the vibe and the groove, essentially. At that point, once you start getting a little bit better at it, you can sort of maneuver your way around the fretboard and try to find some more interesting things to play. But to be honest, that's pretty darn interesting to me, and I'm sure I stole it from the Meters. So if that's the case, it was good enough for them, and they're the funkiest band of all time. So the last thing we can do is sort of incorporate major and minor pentatonic the way I see it. A lot of people would say, oh, you're going to add that F sharp, so you're going to add the major third to the D minor scale. You can think of it that way. I think of it as a major pentatonic sound. But if you wanted to think of minor, you could do that too. So if I was to play on that G7 idea, 1 E and 2 E and we're going to add that to it now. So 3, 4. Let's go back to our 1 chord and we can go. Now we can just go to our 5. Maybe take a little half step maneuver down. A flat G, or A, G sharp G. Back to this guy. Here's our 4 chord. So you see what I did there is I kind of mixed a little minor, a little major third in there. When you're playing these kinds of tunes, there's sort of no rules unless the band is sort of implying something. If it's really super major sounding, I would stay in that vein. But if it's blues, you know that we can blur those major and minor pentatonic lines quite a bit. All right, so you got plenty of stuff there. You have some cool 16th note rhythms, some new chord voicings, and some bubble picking that you may have never heard of before. I know it's one of my favorite things to do. And I know that a lot of people don't do it because of when I'm in a situation with another guitar player and I start doing that bubble picking thing, somebody always goes, oh yeah, that's it right there. So you really want to add that to your arsenal of fun rhythm stuff because you can play single notes when you're playing rhythm guitar, particularly in this kind of vibe, in this kind of style. So add that to your repertoire, practice it, listen to some great funky blues by Freddie King, Albert Collins. They always had great rhythm guitar players in there too, even B.B. King. The guy in the background that wasn't at the spotlight, he was playing some cool funky stuff. Check out the Meters, Average White Band, if you want to go into the 80s and check out Confunction, The Time, Prince. Those are all massive influences on me too, and it's all worked its way into blues playing. So I hope you dug that. I think you need to get to practicing now because this stuff is not easy, but it's a lot of fun. You'll be glad that you checked it out.
All right, so thank you for watching. Again, don't forget to support him down below in the links below. Check it out below the video, right down there. And thank you, sir. This is going to be a long and fruitful endeavor we're going down. So post the comments below. I'm coming back to Nashville in like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So if you want to see more of this or you're ripping jazz, he's got like a whole bag of stuff. Just throw out random things. Can Corey do blank? And then we'll ask him.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's do it.